What we see is, the victim is dead. The bad guy goes to prison.
Yep.
The gavel hits. The judge says next. And we say
Yep.
next. And we never look at the impact on the kid, the best friend, the community members, the cop who led the investigation, the
Right.
judge, the
Right.
jury members.
Shortly after his 12th birthday, Collier Landry found himself in a televised courtroom where he was testifying against his father in his mother's murder trial. As you can imagine, that event changed his life. But then, Collier has gone on to become a powerful filmmaker and storyteller where he unashamedly uses his platform and help folks who have been through literal hell find hope.
There are going to be moments in your life where you're going to be faced with a choice. Can you look yourself in the mirror and say, I left it all out on the floor?
This is the incredible Collier Landry. Let's imagine that you're on an airplane and you're seated next to a stranger. And they look over at you and they say, well, what do you do for a living? How do you choose to respond to that?
I think, not to sound weird about it, but I think I probably tell people that I'm a storyteller. I think when I'm,
Why would that be weird? Why would you think that's weird?
well, because I think the landscape of social media and the current climate we're in, everybody's a storyteller, everybody's a creator, right? But I've been saying this for like 2 decades. I'm a storyteller. I'm a creator. I'm a creative person. I've been fortunate to have done this professionally in my life for as long as I can remember. Since I dropped out of music school, and I've lived in Los Angeles and in California, and but yeah, I would say I'm a storyteller.
In your film, you said that art was always your escape, and you found your voice as a sophomore.
I did.
And I was curious, I thought, what happened in his sophomore year where he found his voice?
I like this. Okay, so I'm like an athletic guy, right? I always feel like I have been, but one of the things that I could not get together, or at least make, was the basketball team. Every year I try out, but I wouldn't make it. And this is when I had transitioned into going to public school, and I was tried out my freshman year, didn't make the freshman team. Tried out my sophomore year, didn't make the junior varsity team. So I remember I was riding back in the car with my adopted mother, Susan, and I was singing along on the radio to a jingle. And she goes, well, you should probably try out for the choir. You probably wouldn't get cut from that. And I think she was being maybe a little snarky about it. But I kind of, the lights went off. And I had always been somebody who had sang and was into art. And that was a big part of my early childhood development. But, and I was a kid. I remember my parents would take me, my real birth family would take me we would go on a road trip or something. And my parents had a station wagon. So I would sit in the back of the station wagon over the bench seat where the back is. And if you remember those big old, what are they, Cutlass Supreme, or I don't know, whatever.
Yeah.
The giant station wagons where you could throw the luggage in the back. And I would sit over the bench seat and I would pretend they would play, the Metropolitan Opera or the New York Philharmonic, and I would pretend like I was a conductor conducting the symphony pit, the orchestra pit. So I had this music inside of me, and I remember shortly thereafter, I was in a really low place in my life. I had just been adopted about a year before then. I had just gone through this horrible tragedy, which I wouldn't wish on anyone, and I had gone to a mental institution where I was supposed to stay for 3 weeks, and they let me out in 5 days. They're like, you're a normal kid, despite what you went through. So I was really trying to like find my way. And I went into the choir room on like a lunch break. I walked in, and the choir teacher's name was Mrs. Arnold, and I said, "Hi, my name is Collier, and I think I can sing." And she just kind of looked at me like she's eating her lunch, and she's like, "Oh, this kid, okay." She's like, "Okay, fine, all right." She goes over to the piano and she starts playing stuff. And she's like, "Okay, can you vocalize this?" And she's playing these vocal. I was like, da, 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 going through this, and she starts like playing again a little bit harder. And she stops and she looks at me and she smiles. She goes, "Yes, Collier, you can sing. You're quite good at it."
How did that feel?
It was affirming. It made me feel good. But it wasn't until the very end of the day when all the popular girls, the senior girls, everybody was coming up to the guys, the basketball team that I didn't make. All the people were like, because they were all in choir and in the show choir, they were like, "Dude, we hear you're like ridiculous. Like you can sing. Can you sing something for us?" So I start like singing like Boys to Men or some doo-wop. And they're just like, "Who are you?" I mean, they knew me. They knew who I was because of what had happened to me. But they're just like, "Who knew you had this talent?" And that, I ended up then becoming, junior and senior class president. I ended up becoming the school choir star. I ended up going to music school and then moving out to Hollywood. So that was literally the genesis of this entire journey, right there in that moment, in that choir room on a lunch break with Mrs. Arnold.
Do you sing anymore?
I do.
How? When?
In my own little private thing. I used to sing on my podcast a lot. But yeah, music is something that, although I love it, I work as a filmmaker, so I'm always in this sort of form of creative expression. But it's definitely something that I'm starting to move back into.
Why did you go into filmmaking?
I got into filmmaking, as I said, when I would tell people what I do as a storyteller. I had a story that was that needed to be told because I needed to process it, and I needed to share that with the world for whatever that's worth, because I needed to complete that for myself.
Did it do that for you?
It did. And it's, it ended up being this thing where it's like, I think you spend a lot of time growing up, or let's just say you're like, "Oh, I want to be a millionaire," or "I want to be a basketball star," or "I want to be a this or that, own a business and make all this money or travel the world." And then you get there to that thing, and then you're like, kind of like, "Well, okay, cool. Okay, check that off the list. Now what's next?"
Yeah.
That's what happened. I spent, I moved to Hollywood. I learned the craft of filmmaking. I had seen a film that was so instrumental in my life. It was called American History X.
Okay.
And I remember I went to a theater in Northridge, California, and I don't even know if this theater is still there. And I was with a friend of mine from college, and we had gone to see this movie. He was black, or he is black. He was black. He is black.
He was.
And for those of you who've seen American History X, it's still just as powerful today. It deals with racism and the legacies of violence and trauma. And I remember leaving that theater with him, and I said, and we were just taken aback at what we saw, because it's a very powerful film, but also like, whoever made that film gets the consequences of violence. And I want them to help me tell my story. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So I flash forward 8-9 years later. Patriots were also in the Super Bowl at that time. My girlfriend at the time comes into me and she says, this movie producer contacted me on MySpace, and he's a photographer and he wants to shoot some photos with me. She was a model. And so I was like, oh, I was like, well, what movies does he produce? And she starts firing them off. She's like, Booty Call, 1114, Kingdom Come, Havoc, and something called American History. And I said, American History X? And she goes, yeah. I said, get him over here. I want to meet him. And that is my friend, John Morrissey, and we've been friends still to this day. Actually, we just started a podcast together.
I heard Talk. It. Yeah, I was listening to that. Really good.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. So, yeah, that's one of those moments in your life when you're like, okay, this, the material resonates so much with you because it's touched your life so deeply. So when you see it translated on screen, now look, the story of American History X, it's Edward Norton plays a neo-Nazi. He kills a man, a black man, in a very violent way. He goes to prison for that. He then reforms himself because he sees that the legacy of hate and all that. And he gets out of prison and he sees his younger brother going down the same path he was, and he tries to intervene with that and get him away from the people and have this message of like, this is all bullshit. This is literally what he says. This is all. Yeah. And this history that sort of, he resets his life inside and wants to carry that forward. So like all of those themes, right? The impact of the violence, the way that legacy carries and wanting to change that legacy, right? Because for good or for bad, I had a story, I had a history. Now, I didn't kill anyone, my father did.
Right.
And I'm sure you're going to ask me about this, but just in the TLDR, when I was 11 years old, I woke up in the middle of the night on New Year's Eve and I heard the sound of 2 loud thuds. Next morning, my mother was gone. And I confronted my father and he said, Mommy took a little vacation. Over the course of 25 days, I convinced one police detective to believe me, and we solved my mother's murder together. And they found her 25 days later in another state, her body. It was one of the largest trials in Ohio history, and yeah. And it is the subject of a film called A Murder in Mansfield, directed by 2-time Oscar winner Barbara Koppel, which is a film that I ended up making.
Which is excellent.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. And it is produced by John Morrissey and myself. We were the executive producers. But and I'll get into all that. But one of the things that I think makes, and thank you for saying what you said about the film, I think one of the things that makes it really powerful is that it's so authentic. It's just me. Here I am. You go into my therapy sessions. I'm talking about all this, and spoiler alert, but the film culminates in this big scene of me confronting my father in prison about the murder, trying to get him to admit to it. And it's this whole thing, and it's very powerful.
It's a must see, and I think it attests to like the power of storytelling. One of the things I wanted to ask you about, you alluded to it a minute ago, and you've said it in a lot of different interviews, but you said that your goal, I'm paraphrasing here, your goal was to talk about secondhand trauma through your platform and the long-term damage that crimes have, which I think is really interesting. I know you've put out hundreds of thousands of hours of content at this point about this exact same story. You've gone over every freaking detail probably 18 million times. One of the things, well, and rightfully so, your mom deserved her story to be told and you to be able to tell what happened to you. But I was thinking about it and I was wondering, I'm like, what has he learned about secondhand trauma and the long-term damage, and how do you actually convey that through story? Because that is, there's this one, and please tell me if I'm screwing any of this up and call me out on it, but just from the way like I'm perceiving it, is like there's this one terrible event, but then there's years and years and years and years and years of a lot of other stories because of that one event. And a lot of times we fixate on the one event. But I don't know how old you are, but you're a grown-ass man now with a ton of experiences, and you've lived with this your entire life, and you're also a filmmaker, a storyteller, and if your goal is still to tell the story about secondhand trauma and long-term damage, how the hell do you even tackle that? Because you're still probably wrestling with it yourself.
This is all a very good question. And you're right. So to take you back to early 2010s. So I am just starting to work as a filmmaker. I am learning the craft of lighting on set, and I'm essentially in what I would refer to as my film school.
Did you go to film school?
No.
I heard it's a waste of money.
I would
Anyway.
say that I would say that I would tend to agree with that.
Okay.
I'm not. I shouldn't say it like that. You learn a lot of amazing things in film school, like you learn the history of film and all that, but you don't learn the work experience. You don't learn what it's like.
Yeah.
And it's a massive amount of money for one to spend.
Yeah.
But I would say, for me, so I'm working on set, and I remember I met somebody through Craigslist.
Always a good time.
Good old Craigslist, which apparently still exists, somebody told me. And I had met John, obviously, and we had become friends. And he was kind of seeing what I was doing, and I was working on set, and I remember I had become friends with somebody, and they had a rental company. And they're like, "Look, you can come and work on the sets, but you're not going to get paid. You'll get free lunch, but you'll get experience that you won't get anywhere else. Like you'll be on the set of The Social Network, you'll be on the set of a television sitcom. You'll learn all these things." So that's how I learned, and I would work on these crews for free. I was running a dispensary, a mobile dispensary here in California, which was legal at the time, and a nonprofit, and supplementing sort of learning on set until it's reached a certain point where I started working, and I got into buying a lot of gear, renting it back to productions, and sort of following a business model, and then I got into shooting, and but all of this was done to learn the craft of something I had no idea about. But I was like, I'm going to learn every facet of this because I'm going to tell this story. I don't know how this story is going to be told. I don't know with whom I'm going to do it with, but I'm going to do something with it. So by God, I'm going to learn every aspect of this because if I got to do it myself, I'm going to do it myself, right?
Yeah.
And I had even worked with I had a friend who was a writer on Castle, so we were working on like a scripted series about this. And then I've done this countless times, but it wasn't until my friend John Morrissey, we were talking. He was talking about making something. He was getting back into producing, and he had taken a few years off to start a clothing brand. And he said, he's like, I want to do this one project, and I was like, that's stupid. I was like, I got a much better use of your time and your acumen in following the lens of probably one of the greatest pieces of art ever that you made yourself, because he was a sole producer on American History X. I said, I got something. I said, I want to do a series about the consequences of violence. And because my lens of which I approach this, and look, people, when I came to Hollywood or when I came to Los Angeles, like obviously if you were dating me, you knew my story, but you didn't even know that much about it. But like it was never something I led with. Most people that knew me in my friend group were like, yeah, Collier grew up in foster care. He was, he's adopted. His dad killed his mom. He's from Ohio. Yeah. That's all they knew. You know what I mean? Yeah. They didn't know the nuance because it wasn't something that I talked about. And it's not because of I'm ashamed of it or I feel bad in any way. It wasn't that at all. It was because when you grow up in a small town that this happens in, and then you stay in that small town for the aftermath of this becomes what you're known for.
Yep.
You walk in and there's a kid, and I think a lot of people that grew up in Appalachia or small town America can relate to this. Now, hopefully they cannot relate to the fact that their father murdered their mother and that they were on the television testifying for 2 days against that father.
Right.
But they are going to maybe know, like, maybe they got pregnant in high school, or maybe they were the football captain that fumbled the ball at the 1 yard line and lost a state championship. Word gets around, right? I don't know why I chose to pick those two, but I think they're great examples. but that you have this sort of thing, or your dad's a town drunk or whatever,
Yeah.
you have this sort of thing that attaches to you. Now, again, I told the story about, finding my voice, right? Because I was desperate. Not desperate probably isn't the right word. I was driven. I was tenacious in making it that I would not be known for this. And if I was known for this, I was going to flip it on its head.
Come on.
So that was the thing. So flash forward to me sitting there with John and saying, look, I have this idea. And I said, the thing is with these extreme violent things that happen, the bad guy goes, like, we watch it on television. This is before even true crime was a thing, right? Like, there were a couple true crime shows, America's Most Wanted, Rescue 911, Unsolved Mysteries.
Pre-social media.
Yeah, this is pre-social media. This is pre-podcast and all this stuff. This is at a time, and probably I should have started a podcast back then. I'd be a gajillionaire. But this was before all of that, and before. Look, these things are sensationalized. There's still tabloids. There's still the Inquirer. There's still, the birth of TMZ and all this stuff. But true crime was not as hot as it is now, right? Unfortunately. Because I think it's a bad thing that it's this way, but I'll get into that, I'm sure.
Well, let's talk about that later.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I said to John, look, what we see is, the bad guy the victim is dead. The bad guy goes to prison.
Yep.
The gavel hits and the judge says next. And we say next. And we never look at the impact on, the kid, but let's say, or the children, but the best friend, the community members, the cop who led the investigation, the judge, the jury members, the ripple effect from these types of things, and a good thing they're rare. And again, I think that, having something as fantastical as my story is the exception, not the rule. Thank God.
Right.
But you wouldn't know that by looking at the media or social media or these stories that if it bleeds, it leads, that type of thing. So you would definitely have this. This notion that they're a lot more common than they are, but they're not. But you have this just massive ripple effect that comes from these events, and you have people that either that adapt in some form where they internalize it or they become a shell of themselves. And I'm talking about myself in particular, right? Because I think a lot of people, when they see the film, I can remember, I live in Santa Monica, California, and I remember when I moved to this building, one of my neighbors, so all the neighbors had, who's this guy or whatever. And then they discovered that I had this film. And I was out one day walking my dog very early in the morning. I get up early. And
that little baby back there?
Not the little baby. I had a little baby before that.
Little steps.
I know. I had another Chihuahua before her named Blondie. God rest her soul. She passed away in October 31st, 2022. But but Marisol came right after her a few months later, and she's the best. I love her very much. But a little Queen Marisol. But I'm out walking the dog, and my neighbor comes out, and he's he was a contractor, and he was standing at his gate, kind of awkwardly. Blondie's taking a potty. I was like, "Hey, Jerry, what's going on, man?"
Yeah.
And I'm like, "What the dog?" And he goes, and so I just hear this voice go, "So, we watched your film last night," and I was like, "Oh."
Man.
I was like, "Oh, okay." I was like, "Well, thank you for watching it, and thank you." And he goes, "How you're not upstairs, hiding in the corner of your bedroom, muttering to yourself, or under a bridge, with a needle in your arm, is beyond me, man. Like, I don't understand it. Help me understand." And I think that you were asking sort of before, you weren't sort of, you were asking before, like, okay, I talk about the impacts of trauma, and I talk about this, and I focus this on, on the lens of like what happened to me, and share the story, and and how you can turn this trauma into triumph, not to sound cheeky,
Yeah.
but one of the things that, as I am, I spent the last year kind of taking on hiatus. I was directing, I'm doing a documentary, I'm working on a bunch of projects, and I produce a bunch of other podcasts. I did a podcast with Sony called Finding Mom's Killer last year with Sony Music. And so I kind of took a backseat with my content to, pay the bills and bring some runway in for my own projects, but also to take a pause because my father was up for parole last year and he was going to get out. And I had to do a lot of work to figure out whether that was merited and how I was going to not make that possible if he's still the same psychopath that I left in that room, 7-8 years earlier.
Yeah.
But one of the things that, and getting back to what Jerry had said and sort of to kind of flow into what your question was, is because that event happened and I did a podcast about it and it's got 300,000 views on YouTube and it's great. The content is awesome. And I said I'm now to the point where this is like one of the last times I'm going to talk about my story. Because what I'm really interested in and what people have been asking me ever since they discovered the story is, how did you get through it?
Yes.
What did you do? What was that secret sauce that you have? And that secret sauce was creativity and art. I healed from that by choosing to live a life based, an artistic life, which, spoiler alert, I wouldn't say is maybe the best if you're looking for like stability in your life. I wouldn't recommend it for that. There are definitely easier ways to go about making a living.
Yeah.
But perhaps it was the trauma that led me to be able to weather the storm and the ups and downs, the roller coaster of that career. But it is definitely what made me, what allowed me to process what happened. And being able to create something and share it with the world and expose that vulnerability and be your authentic self. Because I remember when we were making the film, I said to Barbara, none of this, there's a scene in the film, spoiler alert, but I go with the detective who I bonded with, who was going to adopt me and who I unfortunately buried 2 weeks ago, Dave Messmore. And it's ironic because both the father figures, there's 3 father figures in the movie. There's my adoptive father, George. There's Dave Messmore, and then there's my real father, and only one of them is alive. 2 of them passed away in the last 2 months. And my father, who's still incarcerated, is still alive and kicking. But I remember saying to Barbara, Dave was going to show me the case file, which is something I had never seen before. I had seen photos of my mom's body, but I remember being in the office with the prosecutor. They were on a desk. They went to get a thing, and I saw them from afar, but I knew what they were, but I didn't want to look.
Yeah.
But there's something that always haunted me in my dreams, right? And Dave said, Barbara said, we're going to go look at the case file. Do you want to come with us? Because I was going to go to the gym while we were filming. And she said, I'm going to go film with Dave, but would you want to go? And Dave was like, no, Collier, you don't need to see us. I said, hold on, guys. I said, this is what we're doing here. And if I am not 100% authentic and in this moment, because this is a golden opportunity, not only for something for me to close this chapter, I've always imagined this, but also to really to show the audience that it's okay to face these demons. It's like, you're here, you're in this journey with me. Here we are together, right? And to be able to do that Like, that's why I was like, that's why we're here. Like, this is why we're in this moment, to do this. And that is incredibly freeing as an artist to do. It's not sexy. It's not the thing that sells. It's not the the flash and glamour side of the art of this world of filmmaking, but it most certainly is the one that connects the most with people. It's the authenticity of, like, because everyone can relate to, like, facing down a demon, or at least thinking about doing that, right? And so I think when somebody, and then later on in the film, I'm confronting my father, which also is like, I can remember there's a moment where I say to him, I don't believe you. And the audience, it was in Amsterdam, the audience just erupts with, yeah! Like, everybody's just explodes of just, like, they were so invested in it. And I don't think about it when I'm saying it. I'm not trying to go for anything. I'm telling him, I don't believe you. Like, I don't believe you. But just the way that the audience was so invested in that moment, right?
Yeah.
Like, that's key. I think I probably wandered a little bit from your
No,
question.
man.
But
No, you ended up right where we need to be, because I wanted to ask you about this too, because you talk about, I wish there was better terms in these, like, cliche words, but there's no other word than, like, vulnerability, like, literally exposed, like, raw, just the truth. That's at the end of the day, what we're going for as storytellers is the truth.
yeah.
But for that to be met with, sometimes I had written this down at the very beginning of your documentary. There was a couple of clips of, I guess it was news folks capturing people, like, outside of the courtroom. And this one lady said, it's better than a soap opera.
Yeah. It's like a movie. Yeah.
I wanted to ask you about that element, because as storytellers and communicators and folks who are feeling really called, for lack of better terms, drawn to going a layer deeper and sharing the truth of their story, their perception, or, point of view, whatever. I know for me, a lot of times the fear is I don't want the bitches to come out and say, like, shit like that. You know what I mean? Because it's like, this isn't a freaking, you know what I mean? Like, this isn't something for you to comment on. You know what I'm saying? Like, this is something that is so much closer than that. And I'm curious, I mean, if there's one person who's dealt with that shit probably more than anything, it's probably you, just people sensationalizing things or kind of missing the point, and tell me if I'm freaking wrong. This is, as a viewer, that's what I got out of that, was like, how the hell do these people go, oh my God, this is like a soap opera, when you're, like, freaking bearing your soul, and these are real people's lives. You know what I mean?
Well, I think, so that was a clip of people who were, so during the trial, okay, so my father's trial was televised, and it was very weird because this is, like, the television station wasn't even, like, prepared for this. So they had to buy, like, more cameras and all this stuff, because it was people were so, my father was a doctor, right? And I think people also have this this idea that, like, I grew up in some sort of mansion or whatever. No, we lived in a very small house.
Y'all looked rich in the photos, okay? There was one with a boat and stuff.
Yeah, but it wasn't our boat. Anyway. But I remember, my father, it was just crazy. My father just started making money, like, right before he committed this murder. So it's just like, you talk about, like, just absolutely just throwing your life away. It's wild. But anyways, that's a whole other conversation. But I think that there was this, my father was a very popular doctor with a lot of people. And I think they said at the time of his arrest, he had seen something like 80,000 patients or something, just absolutely crazy. He was a total workaholic and obviously a womanizer and a psychopath. Yeah. But so people were really invested in it. And they would come to the courthouse to watch the trial in the lobby of the courthouse. So they would have overflow rooms from the actual courtroom and watch areas with TVs. And then they would watch it on television in their homes. I mean, now this is like common practice. You go onto YouTube, there's new things on Court TV and Law and Crime Network every day. There's probably 4 different trials going on, but back then this was not common. And it was especially uncommon that when a 12-year-old child gets on the witness stand to testify against his father, that, that was something that people became obsessed with, because you would never see that, you would, and I think and my friend John Morsey was mentioning it the other day in our podcast. He says, he's like, that was the thing that was so wild is normally you have the kid goes into like a different room with a counselor and they videotape them and they ask them, you know what I mean? They don't put him on a witness stand so he can sit in front of his father who's sitting right there and stare him down, which I did, of course, and he wouldn't look at me. It was this whole thing. And again, for me as a child in that moment, I'm sure a lot of people have feelings about this. Well, they really used you, or you didn't need to do that, or I was like, you don't understand that if they had told me no, I would have gone kicking and screaming. I would have ran into that courtroom. Like, you wouldn't have stopped me. Like, there was no, they asked me, and I remember I was talking, I was giving a talk, ironically, of all places, the FITM, Fashion Institute of Design and Merchandising here in Los Angeles. And a student had asked me, because she had seen my film, and I was talking about like content creation and podcasting and all these things, but she had seen my movie. And she asked me about, was there are you glad you did this? Are you glad that you made the film? Are you glad this? And I said, the thing that I said, if I can convey to you as a young person, there are going to be moments in your life where you're going to be faced with a choice and a decision, and you can face it and you can do with it what you know that you are going to need to do, because you got to think about 10, 20, 30 years down the road. If you look yourself in the mirror, can you look yourself in the mirror and say, I left it all out on the floor, to use a sports reference. I gave everything I have. I left everything there. I did everything I could to get justice for my mother. And for me, when the prosecutor said, well, you don't need to testify, I was like, over my dead body. Because I knew that had my father gotten off and I hadn't have testified, I would never have forgiven myself.
Yeah. Yeah.
And as hard as that was, and as hard as then the aftermath of all that, the people excoriating me or shaming me, there's people that support it, and there's people that, oh, you were a traitor to your father, oh, you're this and that. I mean, lunacy. There are, I can, 30 some odd years later can go, yeah, that was the right decision at the right time. And I'm glad I made it. Because, we go back to, again, this legacy of trauma, these ancillary victims. Many people don't have that opportunity to face down their abuser, their victimizer. They don't get that opportunity. And even at that young age, I knew that this was very rare, very rare. And I knew overwhelmingly at that point at that moment, I knew that it could backfire. He could get off. He had a very high-powered legal team. He could get off, and I would probably go back to living with him. And I would probably be found in a ditch somewhere years later, or I would be consistently reminded of what that time I tried to get him convicted for killing my mom or what have you. And I would have had to have lived with that, Yeah. But I was prepared to do that. And I'm glad I did. And I think that that's one of the things that people see in the film, too, that speaks to them. Or, I think I was saying before we started recording how you would message me, and I said, I'm not really great with Instagram DMs. I don't check Instagram a lot, so I don't go in the DMs. But
That's not a bad
I
thing.
remember the moment. What's that?
So that's not a bad thing.
Yeah. It's funny because then I deal with clients and they're like on Instagram every day, and they're like, and I'm like, how much? I was like, 15 minutes tops.
That's good.
If that, you know.
Yeah.
And mostly Chihuahua videos or penguins or this, and then friends, and I like stuff and comment or whatever. But I remember discovering the hidden messages filter, and when I clicked that, thousands of messages had populated from people who had seen the film, who had seen my story, and reached out and just were like, again, thank you for doing this. This brought me peace because I never got to confront my abuser. I never got to do that. I never had that opportunity. That person will never, nobody believed me either. You know, thank you for doing that. Your mom is proud of you. I'm proud of you. You've given me hope. You've made me feel complete. I mean, those are, you know, that's incredibly powerful stuff.
Yeah.
To impact people's lives who feel unseen and unheard in their own traumatic situation, that they feel a sort of almost, you know, not to be cliche, but a completeness, I suppose,
Yeah.
from what you did. It's pretty cool.
You said earlier the whole true crime thing, obsession people have,
The
and
whole
how
true crime thing.
it's crazy. It's like our obsession as humans with this stuff. And I was thinking about you, and I was like, isn't it interesting that he's a storyteller and he's telling a story about a literal crime and then the repercussions of a crime and, you know, the violence and all of this stuff. How do you, as a storyteller and a filmmaker, tell really freaking hard stories, but also to not feed a machine that like creates like the true crime genre? Or is that something you even think about?
Well, so I actually, because I thought, all right, people will be really interested in because I would go on podcasts. I've been on some big podcasts. And I'd be like, you know, people will be really interested in hearing the survivor's perspective, or like what this really applies to, and my sort of take on true crime. It is something that does not fulfill me, and I am not interested in it, just so you know. But I was like, I'll try this as a content format.
Okay.
Because I feel that I can really offer a very unique perspective through this lens. I'll tell you something. People couldn't care less. Unfortunately. I remember I did this show with Mario Lopez called Supersize My Pool. And I did a bunch of pool shows, just we call them process shows for what was it, HGN network, whatever, yeah, Home and Garden Network. Anyways, or HGTV, yeah. But I remember the producer of that show. We were talking about something. We were talking about the nature of reality television. He goes, "Yeah, Collier." He's like, "People want to see the Coliseum," and it's very true. They do, and again, and there is. In all fairness, there is this aspect of people who do consume true crime, because I was always asking people, like, why are you so interested in true crime? I can remember touring with the film, and these little teenage girls came up to me, and they were such a big fan of the story and everything, and they had watched the Forensic Files episode, which is, you know, infinitely popular, and all of this, and they wanted to ask me questions, respectively, of course, but they wanted to ask me questions, and I just looked at the little girl, and I said, if you can do anything with your life, go outside, play volleyball, go play with your friends. Don't think about stuff like this, because the world is not like this. Like, you're looking at a microcosm of this. And she wanted to be a forensic scientist, and she was very interested in it. But I was like, please do anything else with your time, please. But it's just something that I realized that's why I was like, this year I'm going to start making a content pivot. I don't talk about true crime anymore. I'm not interested in it to begin with. And I don't think people really are. They want to pretend like they are interested in, oh, how are people impacted? Oh, what is this? But they just want it. They want to listen to it. They want to consume it, fantasize about it.
You're right. You're right.
and they don't want to deal with the real world impacts. They really don't want to think about like what they are talking about, or the people who are making obscene amounts of money. And these are not just individuals. These are corporations that monetize this first,
Yes.
far before some podcaster did. So
Yes.
we can't throw them under the bus without throwing all the tabloids and everything else under the New York Post under the bus first.
Yeah.
Because those are the culprits of this, of feeding this machine. But yeah, people don't want to, they don't want to feel guilty about their guilty pleasure. Now, again, I am not shaming anyone or trying to chastise
This is
anyone
good, though.
or say you shouldn't do this, but I am saying very clearly, as someone who had to live this, I was forced into true crime. I didn't decide to partake in it. I didn't become a detective. I was forced to be a detective. You know what I mean? I didn't, I had to live this. I have more, I tell people sometimes, I was like, I have more time in prison than any free man I know, outside of someone that works there.
Yeah. Yeah.
I have spent more time talking to inmates about their stories, to my father in the prison, to being in the prisons, seeing the process of the incarceration system, which I could speak days upon, and seeing that I have seen and heard things that you would never, ever want to know about. And, but for anyone, like, I find this, like, the obsession with it. But then when you go back to those hidden messages, there are people that consume this content because they never got the justice.
Damn.
And when someone
Damn.
gets justice, that completes them. Well, at least somebody got it. Somebody confronted their abuser. Okay, they went to prison. Okay.
I think you freaking nailed it, man. I know we're 4 minutes away. Do you have a few more minutes for a couple more questions, or do you have a hard stop?
I got all the time.
Don't
Heather,
tell
I
me
got all
that.
the time in the world for you.
Don't tell me that. I wanted to ask you what is the part of your experience point of view that you want to talk more about and use in your storytelling that you don't feel like you get as much of an opportunity to? What is important to you to express that people may not know you for? Like, what part of this is important?
Well, it's interesting because we started the conversation, and it's because you're a creative, and I think that's how you view me as, or a creator. But there are people that do not know. I've directed a music video that has 1.7 or 8 billion views on YouTube. It's one of the most popular videos, live video. I remember people discover me. Cool. I have worked with some of the biggest stars on the planet. Now, I didn't say, let me take a selfie with you. You know what I mean? I did a cover song of a Billy Ray Cyrus song because I was at Miley's house with Billy playing Van Morrison on my guitar with him. And he said, I got a song if you want to do a project. You know what I mean? Like, I have this whole side of me, and that, which has never been a public thing, because everybody's just seen what I did with the murder in Mansfield and then talking about the true crime. So for me, and right now is February 5th, 2026, my next chapter is sharing with the world, this is how I processed everything, and this is what I did to do that. Because everybody asks me, like, this is sad. Like, it's now, I spent 3 years telling the story or analyzing other people's stories too. Now it's like, okay, here's the part that's the most interesting, is what I did and how I can help you do that too.
Come on.
You know?
Come on.
That's what I feel passionate about.
How do you, I wanted to talk to you about the healing element, because I think you said that too in the doc or whatever. You're like, my next focus is healing. And I know you answered that healing was through creativity, but what does that look like tactically? Is it literally just making shit? You know what I'm saying? Because, like, how do people use the vessel of creativity and storytelling to heal? Do they have to tell theirs? And I know you're not like a psychologist, need to predict stuff, but just like with your own experience, was it needing to tell that story to kind of get it out and get that energy out of you? Or is it literally just being able to channel? I don't know if you're a spiritual dude or not, but like the muse and all that crap,
Sure.
you know, yeah, I just threw up all over you, but what you think?
No, I think that it's a combination of all those things, right? It's again, for years, I worked as a professional. Now I'm starting to put things out for myself, and I have that persona on the world. I was doing that for other people. Like I was doing that back in the Vine days and the Twitter days, and and pre-TikTok, making content, YouTube content for other people, music videos, all the social media posts, working for record labels, working for film studios, doing shows. So it's exciting for me to share that aspect of my life. But I think that, yeah, it's anything that makes you wake up in the morning and feel good about what you're doing, that says, this is where I came from, and this is how I'm going to process it, whatever that art looks like to you. And maybe that art is an addictive thing with me, is thinking about a concept and going into ChatGPT, building out a prompt and saying, I want to talk about this. Or you're translating, some people use their art in their work, and some people use their art in their life, right? Mm-hmm. And being able to just give something back that makes you feel fulfilled and makes you feel like you're expressing yourself, that's your art right there, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I would, I don't know you at all, like what we talk an hour, but what I've consumed of your content and a little bit I know about you, I would say like, hey, his gift lies in communication. I would say you're just a communicator. And a performer too, I would say, not like a performer like, but like, you command like you have presence and you command attention and you can hold that, which is, a gift. But I was also watching like your cinematography reel, and you're fucking good too, man. Like that was like, you have just a really great eye. And I was curious, I was thinking like within the filmmaking space, like where's your passion in that? 'Cause I mean, that encompasses, writing, shooting, editing. I mean, there's so much there. Where are you the most passionate about?
So something that we didn't talk about is, and you asked me about like my childhood and the moment that things changed. So, and I mentioned my adoptive father passed away a couple of months ago.
Yeah.
And George and I had a complicated relationship growing up, but after me getting out of the house as a kid and stuff and getting into my own life, we were good, right? He's in my film, and there's stuff on him on stage talking, and it's great, right? But this was his camera, and I used this camera. I took a photography class my junior year of high school, and I learned how to take photographs. And I used this same camera to take photographs of Andre Agassi and Pete Sampras when they played. And I grew up, I was a tennis player, I still am, and they were like my idols in the tennis world. But that particular moment of having this tool in my hand gave me like that axe that I could sharpen, because I knew I could always go back to the visuals.
Yeah.
And so it started with photography, and then it expanded into cinematography. Because I remember just saying to somebody out loud, I was on set lighting, and I said, wait, you can make money by shooting movie, like you can be the guy that like the cinema, like a cinematographer, like that's what they do. I was like, oh, that sounds like fun. That really sounds like fun. And I just, took to it like a duck to water. But yeah, again, being obsessed with that craft, it gave me that's what ultimately led me through the trauma, because I was doing something with that. And it dates back to getting that camera. And my father gave me this camera much later on in life. He was like, oh, I'm getting rid of it. And I was like, I don't have anything from him, but I have this. And this is what changed my life. This Canon AE1, which is made in the 80s, with this 50 millimeter lens. This is what changed my life. And I can remember, and I haven't really paid a lot of homage to George since he passed, but I remember him saying to me, I was 21. I dropped out of music school, and I was kind of trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And he said, do you want to be a big fish in a little pond? Or do you want to go out into like where the ocean is and swim with the sharks? Because I wanted to go back to California. And he said, that artistic life, that life is a good life. If you can make that life happen, that's a good life, Collier.
Damn.
That's a good life to make.
Are you spiritual?
I am.
How do you wrestle with spirituality in the midst of all that? I'm sorry, I ask like these like deep ass questions. I'm like, what is the purpose of life?
What is the meaning of life? And you got 20 seconds left. What is the meaning of life?
No, but like spirituality in the midst of like all the shit you've been through, and then creativity. I'm so interested in that because just to give you context for the question, because for me, I call it my new church, like the creative space, because I left the church a long time ago. It's a whole story, but I feel like for me, creativity was like a connection to God without like the dogma and the religion and all that, because you don't have to say anything or wrestle with anything. You just make stuff that says things and you can just leave it at that. And it's so mystical. But I'm also a weirdo woo person. So I'm curious your thoughts.
I couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more with that. I think that is when you connect on a creative plane, when you hit, but I think that applies to anything. Like, okay, let's just go back to sports, because it's a thing that we reward in our society and we see and we place an emphasis on, right? The Super Bowl
And you're
this
excited
weekend.
about the Patriots. So.
I'm like, I could really care less, but either one, they win, I'm great. And I'm not invested in it, right? I'm not going to die with any. I'm not going to die on any hills, that's for sure. But if you look at sports, right, you'll see they're like, that person's in the zone where they just rise to a level where you're just like, that's like, what is happening? Like, they are so much better. They are so much more connected than every person around them, right?
Yeah.
And, I was just sending this to my therapist the other day, but there is a print. I've been thinking about Prince a lot, probably because Minneapolis has been very popular in the in the news lately. But I've been thinking about Prince, and there is a performance of "While My Guitar Gently Weeps" at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame posthumous induction ceremony for George Harrison. And it's like Tom Petty, Steve Winwood, all these famous performers on set, and Prince, or on stage, and Prince. And he breaks into this guitar solo that is, you can't describe it. He's just tapped into this other level of just this. And you see things like that creatively. So yes, when you see things like that, that is a spiritual moment unfolding in front of your eyes.
Yeah, I'm fascinated with it. Fascinated.
And I think creativity is sort of the shortcut to that, if you will.
Yeah. Yeah.
But God is present around us. God or spirit or whatever we want to call it is around us all the time. You just have to tap into it. I can remember, like I said, I don't watch, a lot of content. I usually watch music content and feel good content, but there was this thing that on National Geographic where it was they were filming a drone shot, and it was all these baby penguins walking towards a cliff in Antarctica. And it's all baby penguins, hundreds of them. And they're on the cliff in the ocean. And normally the baby chicks jump off like a little ice shelf, little ice thing into the water, like boop, just shh. This is a cliff. It's like, however, 50 meters high. And they're making all their little noises, and the first one just jumps off into the water and comes up. And then the rest of them, they all are just like cheering in their little penguin voices. And then they just start going one off after another, after another.
Oh, yeah.
That's one of those experiences that says to us, God is omnipresent, right there. Those, is that Picasso drawing on a napkin and handing it to someone? No. But that is life showing you that there's much more that exists out there than what we realize.
What's your
Did
vision
that answer
from
your
here?
question?
Yeah.
Did that answer your question?
What's your vision from here? Cast it for me. I want to hear.
My vision for, I guess, myself is I'm learning every single day. I am always learning. And I'm
What did you learn
excited.
today?
What did I learn today?
I'm going to put you on the spot.
Sure. I learned that if you thought someone was super cool on social media and you followed them, that one day you would end up talking to them face to face.
That's right. That's right. So watch who you follow, because you never know. They'll be like, hey, you do my podcast?
Watch who you follow, exactly.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I'm excited because for the first time in my creator career, as in Collier is the facing forward creator here.
Yeah.
I got enough runway to do things that I want to do, and it's pretty cool.
You're working on a documentary, right? Can you talk about it, or is it secret?
No, I'm doing a documentary about the programming language C++.
What's that?
So C++ is a programming language that is in everything that we do, from the engines in the airplane that fly you to your iPhone, to Photoshop, to the Mars rover, to the New York Stock Exchange, to trading platforms, crypto,
Is there a conspiracy theory here?
AI. There's no conspiracy theories, no. It's just programming.
So you're doing a documentary on programming. What about it?
So specifically, this company contracted us to do it about a set of libraries, a subset of libraries called Boost. And in particular, there's one library called Boost Beast, which is used in like high frequency trading firms, which trade stocks in like nanoseconds. But it's an overarching theme. Overarching theme of the movie is how Boost and that community integrated into C++ and how that has integrated into our lives. It's a fascinating project.
There's so much about this world that these little niche things. It's crazy, crazy. I wish we had another hour. I'd break down how you're doing that film. But I have a final question to ask all my guests. But thank you, man, for coming on, for agreeing to talk to a complete stranger. This was so much fun, and I was so curious about not only like your story and where you're at now, but also too, like as a storyteller and a creative, how you think through what stories you tell, and then how to articulate it in a way that not only honors the story, but also to honors the creative process and your healing journey. You're fucking fascinating. You're a fascinating guy. Where would you like to direct our listeners to? What are you the most excited about and like them to take action on?
So you can follow me on all the social media at Collier Landry. My YouTube channel is a popular place. It's start ramping up more content on there because, like I said, I took a hiatus for most of 2025, but I'm back in 2026. But yeah, or on here on Instagram at Collier.
But you won't answer the DMs because you're not checking them.
I will. I'm trying to get much better about that. And I have a team now, and they do the Facebook stuff, and they're, I try to be more, I try to be more active with that. But yes, on all the platforms, I'm on TikTok at Collier Landry. Everything is at Collier Landry. My website, collierlandry.com, which is not great, but it's getting better. And then my podcast, which is the Collier Landry Show, and the new podcast, which is part of the Collier Landry Show, is called Movie Talk with John Morrissey. And we're on episode 2 releases this next week. So three or four probably by the time this is
so cool,
out,
man.
But, yeah.
I can't wait to see where you go from here. Very last question. What is something in your life right now that you are deeply questioning? And it can be related to what we talked about, or it could be, why'd that one penguin jump off the mountain? You know what I mean? So it could be like whatever's been on your mind, like this past week or so. What do you have a big question mark around?
What I want to know is, why do I feel compelled at least once a week to ask ChatGPT if my dog thinks that I'm its person, and how do I know if it loves me? How do I know if little Marisol loves me?
Why do you think
And
ChatGPT knows that?
And I think about this, and I'm like, why am I asking ChatGPT this?
I feel like, and this is me being sexist. I'm going to be very, very sexist, this statement, but I feel like all the men in my life, like literally a friend DM'd me today and was saying like he made a decision because ChatGPT told him to. And I'm like, there's a lot of stock being put on something that is very impressive, but also very underdeveloped.
And developing very rapidly. For good or for better or for worse. For this film, I had interviewed a lot of people that work on for Google Gemini, Claude. So because C++ is a backbone architecture of AI for sure. But people work at NVIDIA, for example. But It's interesting, and it's you with AI too. You have to prompt it in a way that it will tell you the truth, not just what you want to hear.
Amen to that. Yep. I don't think we
I
want to know
learned
the
that.
truth. I don't think people want to know.
No, I don't think they do either.
Well,
They want someone to
there's
make
that.
them feel good about the decisions they're making, whether they're good or bad.
Let's keep going.
I
Collier,
just want
thank
to know
you.
if my dog loves me. That's all.
She does. I promise you that. Collier, thank you for your time. This was awesome.